Okay. Well, good day. Hello, Richard. How are you
Good
doing?
morning. Good morning, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So we thought it might be a good idea to be a little bit curious about our different educational contexts in terms of how we deliver and implement mindfulness in schools programs. Because obviously we come from different necks of the wood, different places in the country, have different backgrounds and kind of got to mindfulness through different ways. But I think we know each other quite well now and know that actually there's so much that we have in common in terms of how we deliver mindfulness and how we are as human beings and why we do it to support children and young people's welfare, that there's so much of a commonality rather than differences. But let's see if that's the case by our conversation. So we do want to be curious about some of these questions about when we describe our educational context and how we might have implemented mindfulness, what that kind of journey was for us both within our schools, and look at what we've learned from it, because we've been doing it for quite a long time. You a little bit more longer than me, but and then also do we think there are some differences or are there some similarities, and what are the good things that we've learned from it all?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So shall I start off about where my
Yeah, Jason, go
is?
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about your sort
So
of context.
yeah, so Raise the Youth Foundation, we set up a school, an independent special school for children with social, emotional, mental health difficulties back in 2016. We had started in 2011, but we was doing more targeted support for troubled young people and young people that were in need. But mindfulness became something that we felt would be really useful to our children and our whole school community back in 2016. And I was already practicing myself to try and manage some of the kind of anxieties and issues that I had. And I thought, actually, it was helping me a great deal. So I thought, why not try and see if we could share that with the children and the people that care for them. So I came about looking for someone that might do that, and came across your organisation at the time, and went and did the .B course as a mindfulness teacher. And I absolutely loved it. It was in Altrincham I did it with Sophie Sampson. She was one of the tutors, and who I later met in Bangor University and studied with her later on. But and it was a magnificent course. And the thing what I liked about it so much was the colour and the vibrance of the slides and the resources, and how easy it was to be able to read it and prepare it and share it with our children and young people. At the time, though, then we was working with children and young people that was kind of on the periphery of getting in trouble with the law, a lot of children that were looked after, and more of the social emotional difficulties, kind of the old style behavioural school kind of approach to those young people. So .B was really suited in the sense that it was quite, like I said, colourful and modern. The playfulness in it was really, really helpful. The messing around with the good old torch, playing attention. We love the torch in terms of past and future and present, and showing it and illustrating. You can have a lot of fun with that, making it wider and bigger. And play is a big thing, obviously, with children. Yeah. In particular, our children, they really benefit from that. And some of the little things like the shock ball, and these are really, really good, playful, funny things that can make it a lot of fun. And what I found in the course is at that time, we was able to work with, students that were around 8 to 10 in a group because of the types of children we were working with then. When we got more and more students, I thought, you know what, it's a really good idea for us to look at trying to cascade this. And I came across the idea of the mindfulness lead course that you was doing. So I went on that, and that was such a profound experience for me alone, and as it was with the other participants on the course. And I talked about it at one of our conferences, the impact it had on us, because it really brought home that even though I was, someone from Oldham, from quite a deprived background, gone through a lot of things, had an ACEs score of 10, that when I came and met different people from all over the country, we had that sense when we was in the circle doing the mindfulness programs ourselves and doing .B Foundation program, that we were all human. And that was the most profound thing, that, you know, with mindfulness, it brought us closer together. It brought a spotlight on being human, and that we shared a lot of wonders of the world, but also a lot of suffering and difficulties of the world as well. So that was a big thing for us. And the good thing about doing that course, it enabled me to teach the .B Foundation course to all the other staff members, and it was invitational within my school. But over these last years, since 2016, we've been able to teach over 50 members of the staff team, from governors to directors to deputy principals, TAs, you know, support workers, psychologists, and our whole school community have really benefited from that 8-week course. And then from them, we've been able to send some of those staff members to do the other courses, curriculum, to teach mindfulness in our school. So the .B, dots and pause. And the reason why we went on to do the dots and pause was because as the years went by, Richard, we had a number of students that started to come in that had learning difficulties, autism, ADHD, different types of loads of gaps in learning. And we felt it would be good to have some of the other curriculums within school to be able to engage and be able to communicate to them through it. And it's really benefited our school massively to be able to do that. So anyway, that's a bit of an introductory of how we've kind of implemented it.
Brilliant.
Self, Richard.
So yeah, I mean, and interrupt, Jason, if I miss something out, which would helpfully correspond to with what you've described. But obviously, yeah, a different educational context. I teach in an independent boys' school. I'm actually a classroom teacher. I'm a Spanish teacher, a French teacher. I teach religious studies as well. And my background is also pastoral care. So I was the housemaster of a house for 13 years. That was a big part of my life, my family's life, kind of growing up with, you know, 65 adolescents every year for 13 years. It teaches you a lot about how adolescents think and what works with them and what doesn't. Like you, I practiced a lot of mindfulness and I loved it, and it very much changed my life. And like any teacher, you want to teach what you love and you want to teach what you think works. And it seems like, you know, I hope one of the commonalities we'll draw out is there is anxiety and there are mental health challenges, and humans are human. And that's no different in an independent boys' school as it is in any other schools. And so, well, as you know, we began to create, you know, the school where I teach, Tunbridge School, was one of the schools where we began to test and trial what eventually became .B. And now, you know, I'm still doing the same thing. I guess what's changed is the spiraling of the curriculum in the school. So whereas to begin with, it was just Tunbridge teachers from year 9 to year 13. It used to be the case that we just taught it in year 10. Now we teach it in year 10, but we spiral it through the other years. And I think that's what's been most satisfying, has been seeing the way children come to it and go from it at different times in their journey through school. You know, sometimes they need it. And I remember to begin with taking it quite personally when, you know, you get a kid who would come every week for 2 years and then suddenly they just disappear. You know, they just wouldn't need it anymore. But then you had others that were quite rejecting of it in, say, year 10. But then when they get to year 12 or year 13, when they got the pressure of A levels, suddenly they want to do that. I think what's also been really interesting for me is seeing the difference between teaching what I would call, what we've often sort of playfully called in MiSP as conscript audiences, you know, universally, when you've got a class, in my case, a class of, say, 24 year 10, very, you know, very different kinds of kids a lot of the time. I think there's a stereotype of independent schools that it's the same kind of kid. Not the case at all anymore, thankfully. But what I saw was that there's one way of teaching it where you're teaching it to conscripts, and there's another way of teaching it when they're coming to you voluntarily. And that happens in 2 contexts where I teach. One at Friday break times, which has become a lovely time when, you know, we get like it's a morning break, kids will come in, might be 2, it might be 20. It's rarely more than 20. It's rarely nobody. Probably averages 13, 14 kids. They come, they sit, we sit together quietly, they leave. And that's been a lovely little pocket of quiet. But then on Wednesday afternoons, when we have kind of co-curricular activities, there are a bunch of kids who have opted in to do sort of more advanced mindfulness, if you like. And that's when I'm kind of teaching again, but I'm teaching kids who don't know anything. Now they've sat .B, they might have dropped in on a Friday, but they want more depth. And that's really exciting, because that might be, we might sit for half an hour, 40 minutes at a time. And I guess that feels more retreat-like in the context of a school day. So that's it. Oh yeah, and then I guess finally, well, again, for me, and I guess it's partly relevant to this conversation between our different contexts, Jason, is that this year, I had some kids that were so enthusiastic about mindfulness that they wanted to help me bring it to local primary schools. And we went, me and a couple of other older kids, year 12, went to teach Pawsby in Longmead Primary School, which is one of the most disadvantaged schools in the UK, in the southeast, outside of London. And what really struck me was teaching them, particularly with in the same way that we have the graphics and the PowerPoints of .B as a hook, those graphics and PowerPoints in Pawsby as a hook. Different things work with different kids, but it was very, very similar. I was actually struck by how similar it was. The need for play, the need for fun, the need to connect with children where they're at, and spending time working out where they're at so that you can connect with them. Yeah, and that was kind of an experiment, I guess, but one which went really well. And it was great for them to see the difference that mindfulness had made to the, you know, for younger kids to see the difference and hear the voices of older kids for whom mindfulness has really helped them in their education. It was really, really inspiring. It's kind of, yeah, taking it to a different level now.
Yeah, well, certainly, Richard. I mean, similar, I think, you know, we talk about catching mindfulness, you know, within Raise, because we became a community that really was enjoying and benefiting from being able to practice mindfulness. We did decide, as an independent special school, you know, myself, I wrote to the parents and the students and invited them to see if they wanted to get involved in what we do, and said that we would even, because we have a little bit more freedom to teach in terms of our curriculum, we invited them to see if they would go through the programs during elements of the PSHE sessions, but also that we have this extended circle time in the morning. So we have this Are You OK session of 45 minutes each morning to check in on the children, make sure they're okay, because our children, when they come in, sometimes, you know, we have various young people. Some are from very affluent backgrounds, some of them are from really poor, deprived backgrounds. Some young people struggle with sleep and food and all sorts of things. So checking in on them and making sure we're getting their basic needs met. And a good way to do that would be to be, once everyone's experienced doing the .B program or dots or pauses, to do a .B and, you know, do a FOFBOK and just settle ourselves into the day. And that became a real thing for us as a school, for both the circle time, but also at the end of the day, meetings with the actual staff group, that we do the same thing. We do a FOFBOK and a .B and settle in. And it became a cultural thing where you'd have .Bs all over the school. And, you know, it was that's what we did and who we were. And I think, you know, there's no one that's ever opted out not to do it in our school, and we have such a diverse background. In, you know, we're based in Bolton, but we serve children all over the Northwest, and there's different people coming in with different religions, different cultures, different backgrounds, like I said, different characteristics in terms of SEND needs. But what brings us together is this desire for us all to be well and feel safe as a community, and be okay as a community. And it's real, and it really has benefited us in a lot of ways because of that. So, you know, we really enjoy it. And the thing is about the curriculum, when you're actually teaching it, the difference for us is that the classes got a little bit smaller because of the nature of the children's needs. But the actual way we formed a circle, whether you was in 4s or 3s, you know, in a group, it didn't change, you know, in terms of the playfulness. Yeah, you might learn from the young people what their interests are, you know, in terms of, you know, what music they like, what sports heroes they like, you know, different themes. And then you can look at, well, okay, then who's in the world that's practicing mindfulness that they can relate to, so we can talk about that, you know. And we talked about Gareth Southgate's England team and putting the phone in the basket, you know, and having them moments, you know, and mindful eating and stuff like that. So you changed it up a little bit. It's the same part of the curriculum. It's just a different set of people that you're giving them examples.
Yeah.
You know, and the same with music as well, you know. And when you look at Cristiano Ronaldo taking a free kick and he takes a breath, and same as Beckham, and you just use different things that are interest based of your young people, but it doesn't change the curriculum.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, Jason, because one of the things that I've been doing is this year is we've introduced another session, a kind of a co-curricular session, where actually it's sort of a mixture between a group of kids who have who are into mindfulness, but there's going to be people who they've just chosen to do like a round robin, like a rota. What do you call it? When you cycle through different co-curricular activities and do them for 3 weeks at a time.
Yes.
And one of those is mindfulness. And what's been interesting is the way I've taught that is I use the whole of the first 40 minutes just to figure out what they're interested in. So I'll show them different images of people kind of practicing mindfulness, if you like. I don't really mean that. I guess I'll show them, you know, somebody sitting at a desk doing their academic work, somebody taking a penalty, somebody playing a musical instrument, somebody looking really stressed, somebody meditating. I've got a picture to cover different religious traditions. I have different pictures of the contemplative aspects of different faiths. So I don't go into talking about one faith and alienate somebody from another. And I basically use all of that to gather information. And by the end of the lesson, we have a discussion. What do you want to do next lesson? You know, what do you want to look at? Do you want to look at mindfulness in sport? Do you want to look at it mindfulness academic? Do you want to look at mindfulness in anxiety related or stress related situations? Is it exam pressure? What is it? How can I help? I guess that's the phrase. How can I help you?
Yes.
And then for the next lesson, I'll have prepared. I mean, there's only so many things you can do. Yeah. And as long as you've got a little film clip, you know, a little person talking about it, somebody they can relate to in those different areas, you're always going to get them there. And I guess this is the big but, which I wonder what your experience of this is. There will always be people who reject is too strong a word, but I guess it could be the word reject, but who don't engage, in the classroom. And I don't know what your experience is, but I guess over time, I've really learned to be at ease with that. And I know it's a cliche that you notice your own reactivity around the rejection of something that you're trying to teach. But I think I'm finding better ways as I become more experienced as a classroom teacher of mindfulness in just really letting people quietly disengage. Do you know what I mean? And if they're noisily disengaging, finding ways of working around that where I give them alternatives just so that the others in the classroom can be quiet. And if that's doodling, if that's, you know, being on their device, if they've got a device with them, and achieving a kind of a happy acceptance that just come on, let's just all chill together, and you do this and you do that, but in the same space without friction, has become something I feel I'm getting better at that. I'm still learning, but I feel like I'm getting better at that as time goes by.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's when you were speaking about that, it's very similar with the nature of some of our children and young people. Sometimes they do disengage; they don't see the meaning or the connection of that lesson to them in their lives. And sometimes that can be in lots of subjects. It can be in English, it can be in maths, it can be in science, and sometimes it is in the mindfulness sessions within PSHE. But I think a strong thread of what you was talking about, and I'm always saying it to all of our community, including the children, is there's a sense of freedom and choice in mindfulness program in the curriculum, isn't there? And becoming your own circle. And even if some of that circle doesn't want to engage in some of the lessons, it's like you opt in and opt out. It's that safety, welcoming measure. And you kind of also still, sometimes you have some children, young people, that they're saying, oh, this is rubbish, you know, they don't want to get involved. But actually, they're still respecting the space. They're still respecting the strong silences. So even though they might not be doing through the practice, they're still having that moment of rest and settling and seeing other people do it. So sometimes you have some young people like that. You will have also, we've had experiences where some young people are quite disruptive. But again, that's learning that can take place. And that, as long as you don't, you know, you're still embodying mindfulness and the attitudes of mindfulness, and you don't think, oh, I've got to be more disciplinarian. You just, like you said, more accepting of it and say, well, okay, we'll work with that. And if you don't want to do it, we'll look at something else that might be of use to you and help you. And sometimes you can turn some young people, you know, around and get them involved, and sometimes you can, and that's just what it is. And that you could say that for all subjects, you know, of learning our children. But all we're trying to do is share something that we believe would be worthwhile for them, and they can, you know, take it. And some young people, like we might be teaching young people in year 8, and they might be like that year out, and all of a sudden year 10, they're really benefiting from it, and they're loving it. And, you know, some young people that weren't interested, they're loving the body scans before exam time, and they're really settled and relaxed, and they end up being a champion for you. I can think of 2 students that were like that was, you know, really disruptive at the beginning, early on in the days, and then the champion it. There was one particular student that was like that, and they was like going home telling the mum how it's helped them so much, and then the mum wanted to get involved, and we then started developing mindfulness for parents. So we did the nurturing parenting program for them and started doing mindfulness. So that's how it can turn the tide really with it as well.
Yeah. There's very little that a meditation can't help with. And actually, on that note, the other thing, so often it's just giving them permission to put their head on their desk, you know, and not to be too obsessed with posture and the right way of practicing. Just downtime, you know. If they need to sleep, they need to sleep, and having space in a school day where they can put their head, they've got permission to put their heads on their desks is tremendously nourishing for them.
Did things change a little bit for you in terms of engagement, or should I say need of it, after COVID? Because I found that a lot of our young people really wanted, you know, that had done the course already, you know, wanted to have sittings, they wanted to get it more involved, they wanted to have some time and space, because the anxiety levels of our students really increased, as did some of our staff members. So we did a lot more sittings, especially online, as well as we was apart. But then as a special school, we had to go and meet and greet students and parents. We saw a greater need during that time, and further on it developed even more.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I thought it was probably seeing a kind of uptick in staff interest and people who during COVID had experimented and tried with different things, one of which was meditation or mindfulness. I think there was quite it's funny, isn't it? The mixed, you know, there are some great things about COVID, some less great things. The great thing in terms of mindfulness teaching was that switch to a virtual platform, which meant you could teach more people at the same time in different places, which interestingly, MiSP was already doing that. We were already using Zoom before, precisely because we couldn't get people from different teachers in different schools to come together. And also it didn't seem very relaxing for them to be doing mindfulness in their work environment. That was sort of almost more stress. It seemed it was lovelier to give them an opportunity to actually be at home and try practicing. We've done some of those things. The downside there, of course, is the wonder, you know, the great thing about face-to-face teaching. And I absolutely appreciate that's one of the negative things that came out of mindfulness from COVID. But yeah, an uptick in the staff interest. I'm conscious of time, Jason, but can I ask you one thing before we begin closing it? Is what about the safeguarding and the trauma sensitivity part of mindfulness, which is so important? Because again, I suppose one of the key pieces of learning as the years have gone by is how crucial it is to integrate mindfulness into the fabric of the pastoral care and the safeguarding in the school.
Yeah.
What do you, so for instance, before teaching anybody in any year, I will check in with our DSL, with our counsellor, with the others who are pastorally responsible for them, and just say, is there any reason why actually this child may not be in a good place to practice mindfulness? This year, almost every year, there's at least one relatively recent bereavement, and bereavement is a difficult thing to sit with.
Yes.
And I will liaise with the people who are more keyed into those aspects of that child's life, just to see whether it's safe to do that, or whether it's beneficial for them to do that. Well, how do you integrate Raise the Youth?
I mean, it's a really good question, and I think we was fortunate as a school when we linked up with yourself back in 2016. We also worked with Trauma Informed Schools UK and developed that trauma informed approach alongside mindfulness programs. And the big thing for us is, and that I would recommend and advise anyone is, and I think all schools can say this, but us in particular, is know your children well. Those relationships are key. And we do so much work around, you use the professional term of assessment, which a lot of our children don't like, but understanding them, getting to know where they are now, getting to know, their ACEs, their adverse childhood experiences. We do a lot of work around that, knowing our children, knowing their needs, knowing their triggers, knowing those antecedents, their intrinsic issues, and also the external triggers. So it then allows us to look at, not necessarily saying, well, okay, you've had lots of difficulties, so maybe you're not suitable for it. It's about how we nurture and support you, keep you safe within it. And if you're agreeable to it, to face maybe certain challenges or difficulties, your family are agreeing to it, we'll work together, because ultimately you've got the support of the circle. And, for instance, myself teaching it, someone that's experienced of working with you, but also you've got a support network outside of the mindfulness course in terms of your pastoral support. We've got psychotherapists, psychologists, school counsellors, mental health leads. There's people in our community to support you through those different types of challenges and issues. So it's always really obviously important in every session. So we don't presume that once we've done that at the beginning of it, it's almost all like a tick box. No, it's not a tick box. You've got to check in at every session with the young person to check, are you okay? And we have that look. Are you okay? Like, in all of the sessions, and checking in and knowing that there's like almost a cue card that you can opt in, you can opt out. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do all of the programs. You might change an anchor point. So some young people might not want to close their eyes. Some young people might need, to be more comfort and have a heavy blanket on and a hand on heart. Then some young people might want to just, stand up. Whatever it is, it's having that freedom of choice, and also sometimes safety of, can you have something that you can smell, that you can see, in the room? And you're always doing those safety checks and supportive checks with the young people. But I would say the number one thing is know your children well, and don't take for granted that they might have been okay the last week or the last session. They might not be okay today.
Yeah. That's great. That's great advice, Jason. What would that be? Well, what would be to sort of conclude, what would be your one piece of advice for anyone watching this, working with children in classrooms?
Yeah, my big advice was give it a go, give it a try. Because it's really important that, we are curious, we are supportive of children and people. A lot of schools at the moment are doing this thing called PACE, playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And I believe that there's nothing more playful than practicing mindfulness. You can really have a real playful, fun time with children, but teach them a really good life skill.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, that was going to be mine. That sense of play as well, that sense of fun. I think sometimes that can get a bit lost because mindfulness has become a really well understood discipline in the adult world. I think it's easy to forget in a school classroom that you're with children, and that fun will get knowing the children as you say, Jason. I think making it fun, and having a sense of humor about yourself and about what you're doing with them in mindfulness terms as well. I think that sense of humor and it is a if they laugh a little bit and they feel like maybe they're being a bit naughty, within certain boundaries, that probably makes them come into the class thinking, oh, good. I mean, if there's one thing I always feel I want to do is for them to leave with a seed sown,
Mm.
and that if it's all a bit too serious and they turn rejecting, they'll leave with the word. I want the word mindfulness to be associated with something positive, even if that's fun, even if that's sleep, even if it's whatever I can help them to see it might be for them, I
And one
guess
last
is what
thing
it
as
is.
well, Richard, the thing that I recall, and was talking before about our connection and our kind of commonality as human beings, and we do come from different parts of the
Mm,
country, but mindfulness brought us together, didn't it? And I think the big thing for me with children, young people, sometimes when they're struggling with sleep or they're struggling with overthinking, rumination, they're struggling with anxiety and stuff like that sometimes it's good to be within the group as well, within the circle, within the mindfulness programs, to actually realize, oh, actually, I'm not on my own. Other people do think like that. They do feel like
mm.
that. This is going on. And actually, can we practice and try this to try and help us and give a little bit of ease to our life? I know it's not going to solve everything. No, it's not. It might not change it. It might not heal it or remove it, but it might just ease it off a little bit. And I think, people learning that we are all human, and this, for people being British, being together and linking up together and thinking, do you know what? Yes, there are some differences between us, but actually there's more that we have in common.
Brilliant, Jason. That's a great thought to end with. Thank
Okay.
you.
Lovely speaking
Have
to
a
you,
good. Do you
Richard.
have it? Yeah. See you, Jason.
Yeah,
Bye.
take care. Well, good afternoon, Richard.
Good afternoon, Jason. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. So, obviously, this is a follow-up from the previous session of same passion, different setting, and we was given a set of questions from that last session in the chat and in the discussions, and people thought that it might be useful for us to do some follow-up. So here we are together, looking at those questions. So I suppose we might as well just fire away and go through them. Is that all right?
Yeah, let's do that.
Brilliant. So the first one is, what are our thoughts on external mistrained teachers going into schools to teach based on what we said during the last time that it's really important to know your children? So, I mean, the first thing I would want to say about that is that we understand sometimes that schools might not have already had the training from Mindfulness in Schools project, but they might have some connection to people that have, and they want to kind of introduce it to the school, and that feels like it's the easiest way to do that, and we can understand that. But and some schools might do that, but we do know that really all the best practice and all our experience, it's really important if you're teaching students that you have that relationship with the students and you know them well. And then also for me, it's having that infrastructure of support around the students, because some of the themes, some of the practices may, induce, powerful thoughts, powerful emotions, and things like that, where they need support not just during the lesson, where relationships are key to that, but also after the lessons as well. So for me, I would always recommend that it's really the best practice to try and train your own people within school so they can link both their relationships that you already know in the children, in the staff around it, the pastoral care, and even know parents and everything else. So it's a community response. So you're teaching a curriculum, but you've also got that community around the child if they need anything, any type of support that they may require at the time. I don't know what you think about it.
Well, I suppose I'm conscious that there are some people who we've trained who don't currently work in a school, so they are external. And I think that can work, and it can work very well. I think as long as you follow a couple of basic guidelines, and
Mm,
those guidelines for me would always be to make sure that their actual teacher is in the classroom with you, so
mm,
that you don't have to worry about the sort of behavior management issues, and they take that away from you.
Mm.
And secondly, it's just really simple things like having name stickers on the children, because
Mm.
I just find I can't teach children unless I know what their names are. And even having a teacher there to see that the children have put the right stickers on, because they enjoy winding you up, I think can be very helpful.
Yes.
Um, I think the one time when I think there's one situation where it can work better is actually if, because sometimes you want to teach mindfulness in a school, but you don't feel you've got the expertise.
Mm.
And if in the short term you need that expertise to come in, then actually bringing someone external can work, because to some extent they come as a fresh slate, and
Yes.
the kids will give them a chance to begin with. And again, it probably depends what age we're talking about. I obviously work more with adolescents, and they'll probably give you a couple, maybe, I don't know, the first 10 minutes, then maybe a whole lesson. Maybe by the second lesson, you really need to have made sure you've convinced them that you know what you're talking about. So I think it's more challenging,
Yeah.
but I do still think there is a place for it.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
some cases, it could be very good.
And I can see that from what you're saying, and I do know where it's been done and how it's been successful. In fact, on some of the courses I were on, there were some people that were doing it externally, and they were been very successful in doing that. Uh,
Mm,
but I think that those people that I was aware of, they'd done it a few times with the school and different age groups, different key stages as well. So they kind of built that relationship over time anyway, because it weren't like a one-off
yeah.
event.
Okay.
It,
Yeah.
it was going in regular, so I think it still was really
Yeah.
effective in that way
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. So,
So,
so we move on to the next one.
yeah, let's go for that.
So I think the next one is how would you go about integrating mindfulness into other subjects? Example like maths and languages and subjects like that.
Whenever I'm asked that, I always think of a wonderful conversation with there's a Professor Oren Ergas who came to one of our conferences once back in probably 2016, 2017. He's a brilliant academic who looks at the role of mindfulness as part of the way children are taught.
Mm.
And I'll never forget a conversation with him when I asked him, so what about maths? How do you integrate maths into, how do you integrate mindfulness into a maths lesson? And he said, well, when a maths teacher writes up that equation on the board and you don't understand it, he says that your fear should be on the curriculum. Actually recognizing the fear that you feel when you see something written on a whiteboard or a blackboard that you just do not understand, and you recognize and you acknowledge that. If you have teachers that are trained in mindfulness, they don't mention mindfulness necessarily. They don't do a practice suddenly,
Yeah.
but they are aware that is part of the experience of learning a new subject.
Mm. Mm.
Much easier said than done, but
Yeah.
I
But
loved the theory of that.
Yeah, I did it. It was beautiful, and I think for me, it links to growth mindset because it's
Mm,
also that fear, but also the fear of mistakes and failure. So even if the equation's gone on the board and then people are making mistakes, it's like having a pause.
mm,
Well, actually, learning, you learn from mistakes, and this is the process of learning. So it's not that it's a problem to be solved, isn't it? Because that's the key to maths. It's a problem to be solved.
mm,
And
mm,
and there's methods and problem solving, but actually we also know in terms of going on to the same theme of fear and also how the brain works in terms of the cognition, that actually if you have more fear, then it's going to block the mind a little bit more. So then you're not going to be able to be effective to
mm,
solve the problem. So it's like, can we have a pause and can we respond and can we think it through and try and regulate ourselves so we can have a clearer mind
mm.
and then be able to solve the problem. So
Yeah.
there's little things that you can do there. And for me, what springs to mind with maths as well is things around number and time and measurement. So for me, with time, we teach a lot of functional skills in our school in terms of because some children struggle with GCSEs or the actual examination of a GCSE, but we found that they can make progress in functional skills pathways. And for me, looking at time, having sand timers, having different clocks, analog, digital, and actually, setting a timer for a practice and measuring the length of time for how long we was in silence and all, and you can link those types of things with
Mm.
time. And the same with measurement of fluids and water. And there's just taking notice as you're doing the measuring of the water, the sound of the water, and there's things that you can introduce. And you're still
Mm.
going through the themes of mathematics, but you're taking those pauses and you're being curious with it as well. But the big thing for me is problem solving and being settled enough to be able to let the mind have that curiosity about how they're going to solve the problem. I think
Mm.
is a key thing.
Does
Um,
that connect with just you mentioning your school there? One of the questions was I've done prior training, but it didn't feel like it was suitable for my SEMH children.
yeah, yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, we know that mindfulness might not be engaging or suitable for some children and as well as adults. We know that, don't we? You know, in the
Mm.
community, but it's also to be open and invitational to all children. But if you know that some of your children or one particular form group in school that it's just not going to work for them, or you feel you've got some again fears around that because maybe they've got some fragile things going on in their life,
Mm.
or whether some of the children in the SMH school are already involved in, for instance, therapy. So, like if we've got people involved in psychotherapy or with psychologists or with CAMS, we wouldn't go down that road with those children because those children, if they need mindfulness on that level or an intervention on that level, we would leave that to the clinical specialist. But
Yeah.
as an open curriculum, a universal curriculum of learning this life skill of mindfulness and some of the good practices and good values within the programs, if young people can do it, then you give it a try and you support them and you with open heart and curiosity, you see what goes on, and if there are any issues, you support them and maybe you help them to still carry on. But if it's anything's difficult or there's any other concerns, then of course you wouldn't push because it's not about that. It's
No.
about invitation. It's about, is it helpful? If the invitation and the practice isn't helpful, then of course you don't go down that road. But I would say that give it a try, see how it is for people. But also, this is the key: if you know your students and you know whether it's suitable or not, then you make that judgment. But I wouldn't like to say a big statement that all children that are in social emotional mental health schools, it's not suitable for them. I wouldn't say that because actually that's not correct. Because
Mm.
at the school that I actually run is a social emotional mental health school, and we have a number of groups and a number of children that have gone through the program and have enjoyed it and
Mm.
still use it. But like I said, there are some students that we wouldn't have offered that because of different personal issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and exactly the same in my school. I
Yeah.
mean, I would say that what you said there that is key that I think is so easily overlooked with the MISP curricula is these aren't interventions.
Yes.
These are not mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. These
No.
are introductions. They are a very, I always talk about, we're just dipping their toes in the shallow water, dipping our toes in the puddle of mindfulness
Yeah.
without actually, and doing that in a very, very invitational way, so that if they're not interested or if immediately you can tell that they're not experiencing this in a way that they're finding helpful or positive, then you give them options to opt out. And
Most certainly.
we do that all the time.
Most certainly.
Um,
Totally. I would agree with that as well. And it's about that safety inside and safety on the outside. If young people truly it's not helpful to them, then you don't do it. But I think it is, in schools, we're always trying to offer, education, support, skills for children to prepare them for the life now, but for the life
mm,
in the future. And you will try different things, and even like in PSHE lessons and section relationships, healthy relationships, there's lots of themes and lots of issues that are there to support children's growth and development. But sometimes wherever a child is at that time, it might not be right for them.
no.
So it's about making those skilled decisions and being aware of your student group and what their needs are at any given time.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
There was a question now. How would you encourage the continuation of practice outside of a particular lesson? And do you make an effort to involve the classroom teachers and parents? And again, I think this links to the first question really about the other subjects that you could introduce it, to some of the other teaching staff,
Mm,
in terms of having practices. I know we do in our school, but also bringing it involved in the other lessons if it is helpful. It
mm,
can be as a start, it can be thought, like looking at things with curiosity. I was thinking in science, and there was something that I saw in a lesson just the other week where teachers were using mindfulness poetry to teach children how to read different comprehensive words, but in a mindful way, and then also then do creative writing to see how their feelings, how they would
mm,
describe their feelings, powerful emotions, happy emotions, and then write poetry about it. So it can link and it can follow up into other areas, I think. Uh,
mm,
and the same, the exercise that we do where you're back to back and you're doing attentive listening.
mhm,
Someone
mhm,
could be reading a piece out to
mhm.
listen to it and stuff like that. And you could do that with not just English, but also foreign languages and see if people
Yes.
can listen and return
Yeah.
the language.
Yeah.
There's lots, isn't there?
I mean, in terms of continuation of practice outside of a lesson, I would say I've really softened in that regard over the years. I think in the very early days, in the early sort of 20 teens, I would really try and encourage them to do a bit of home practice, um, almost like as a homework. But I think as we've become more trauma sensitive, as we've wanted to make things more and more invitational, I've really backed away from that.
Mm,
I make it available to them and say, this is where you can do a practice, have a go. I'd love to know what you notice if you do have a go, but I don't want them to come to the next lesson feeling that they haven't done their homework.
yeah.
I want them to come to the next lesson just thinking this is going to be different. I don't have to worry. I'm not being examined on this. This is a pause in the school day in terms of the classroom experience.
Mm,
So I'd say I've changed quite a lot over the years in that regard.
yeah.
But
And
at
I
least
really,
you give them an idea of where they can go if they want to do more. That's the key.
most, most certainly, and I really like that. I think that's a beautiful extension of the invitation, isn't it?
Mm,
That freedom. So all because we
mm,
teach so it's then not something that you have to keep on repeating or you have to do homework or you're going to be tested on it. There's a free sense of freedom that you've got this skill now. You use it or you don't use it. And it's you're free to choose really.
yeah. Yeah.
I like that. Um,
Really.
so there was another question here around I know they touched upon it also, to parents. I know there are programs like the Nurturing Parenting program, and there's other things that other people do
Mm,
in terms of parents. But I think that's optional, and I think it's sometimes very difficult as well to make time for parents, especially from a school perspective, to invite them to maybe do sessions. But one idea that would spring to mind, I know that some schools do coffee mornings and different things for certain parents to come in and our particular Senko department will have certain parents that have a little bit of a support group. So there could be introductions in some schools, but it just depends about what your availability and time is, I think, around.
yeah. I mean, around, to be honest, with adolescents, I always joke that the one way to put adolescents off doing anything is to tell them their parents are doing it.
Yeah,
So I'm quite,
it's not cool, it's not
it's
fresh.
not a great idea. So
Yeah,
I have run parent courses, which actually I've really enjoyed teaching. I think they've really enjoyed learning, but we've kept it very separate from this is what the kids are doing, or kids, this is what your parents are doing. Just with teenagers, that's just never going to work.
yeah.
So
So
there's one more question, I think, isn't there?
yeah, there was a question on, we know the positive impacts on mindfulness with children and young people, but it's difficult to capture in terms of, as a school, and the academic literature suggests that there are limited effects. Are there any ideas how you can measure these, within a school context? Um,
Yeah, I mean it's a hot topic at the moment, isn't it? And
it's
and it's one that is very close to MISP's heart in terms of I think where things have gone wrong in the past is where measures of the kind of clinical mental health measures have been used to try to measure the effects of a classroom curricula.
Mm.
And I always say it's like trying to measure gas with a slide rule. It's just a different, we're not teaching this as an intervention. So
No.
to actually measure it using clinical measures just feels inappropriate and unhelpful.
Yes.
What we need to measure is how is it working on an ongoing basis with the children that are in front of us. That's
Most.
what we have to know as teachers. And that has really progressed. And one of the things I'm doing a lot of now is that immediately after a practice is just to find a way, and there are various ways you can do this, but find a way to anonymously gather feedback on how they're finding it.
Mm.
And this is quite a nice way of almost safeguarding and giving individuals opportunities to say that even if they look like they were enjoying, the 2 minute, the 3 minute practice that you did, the dipping the toe in the water, that they have an opportunity to say, actually, I didn't really enjoy that. That
Mm.
wasn't very positive.
Mm.
You don't even necessarily need to know who it is that is feeling like that.
No.
Because as long as you know that there is somebody who is, and sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't, you can say, look, if you are somebody who is finding this, then, get in touch with me or let me know, or try this, give them an opt out, give them an escape hatch if you like, even for the lightest practices. So that's the way you can get the way you can make sure that you give that it remains interventional throughout.
Yes.
But then the other thing, of course, is to measure the people or to get the feedback, the qualitative feedback of children who are enjoying it and
Yeah.
actually get them to tell other children that they're
Yes.
enjoying it. And that for me has been one of the biggest shifts where I work is that we have, year 12, year 13 who are really excited about mindfulness and they're encouraging friends of theirs to come to the drop-in sessions.
Mm.
And that, there's nothing more powerful um, than student voices in
Most
terms of bringing and inviting other students to have a go.
most
And I stress all the time, it's just have a go. You're not saying
yeah.
do a whole course necessarily, just have a go and see how you find it.
And I remember, for me, and no disrespect to the amazing prominent guests that we've had at previous mindfulness in schools, conferences, because they obviously have been spectacular, but they wasn't the stars of the show, even though they were very prominent. It was always
Mm,
the children.
always the children.
Children was always the stars of the show.
Mm,
They had their voice and they were on those stages or the videos describing what they'd learnt. So they didn't know about mindfulness. And then all of a sudden, that innocence, that beginner's mind, that telling us everything about what they'd experienced and what they knew about mindfulness and how it was for them was always brought a great smile to my face.
mm,
And for me, that was the most powerful thing. And then the teachers and the people in their community saying what difference it made to their school. For me, that's what matters. We're introducing something that we're saying it might be helpful, it might be enjoyable, it might, it might make a difference, and it might make a difference now, it might make a difference in the future, but it's something that we're just saying, here it is, there's something here, give it
mm,
a try, see how it is. And for them to give their voice and their feedback, I think that's one of the most important things, and
mm,
and their experiences, So I would say that, like any curriculum, it's what's the starting point, what did you know, and then obviously schools is about learning knowledge and building skills. So have you then
mm.
learned the knowledge and have you built some skills? And then how are you going to use that in your life? How's it going to, it be implemented in your life? I think that's important for children,
Yeah.
teachers, and schools.
And actually, it's a good opportunity for me to just mention, Jason, that in MISP we have this pathways model, which helps schools to sort of navigate their way from not knowing anything about mindfulness to having a more mindful community within their school. And stage three of that pathway we've called a sort of portfolio. And the idea is that schools and the teachers who are leading the mindfulness and the students who are doing the mindfulness build up a portfolio of evidence, if you like, of a record of everything that has been going well and that has been going badly in terms of their mindfulness training. So you've constantly got this body of information that you can look back on and learn from, but also use as evidence going forward if you're trying to, persuade colleagues that this is a good idea, but not I think it's important to, from my view, is not to use it as a kind of, it can be helpful in, selling mindfulness, if you like, but also to be really honest and really transparent about the fact that this is not for everyone, that this
Yes.
is invitational.
More,
And if you can actually show that there have been very few negative responses to it because it's remained invitational, that in itself is actually a strong piece of evidence, if you like, for anybody who is saying, well, no, we shouldn't be doing this because of X, Y, and Z, seeing it through the clinical lens of a deep dive into mindfulness, as opposed to the classroom lens or the school lens, which is toe in the water, very light introduction, have a go, see what you think,
more
which is a
so.
different approach to the adult mindfulness courses that most people might associate mindfulness with.
Most certainly, and it sounds really useful that that will be a really useful guide and tool, and I think that the big message is that it is invitational, but also I think when you speak to teachers and people that work in schools up and down the country, they come in to make a difference to children's lives, and if
Mm,
a curriculum, a teaching, a relationship, the group that you create whilst doing the program gives some skills to children, some long-lasting memories of fun and good times. Because we have to remember that the sessions that we do, there can be lots of, even though we sometimes there's silence in the practice, there's lots of laughter, there's lots of fun, there's cheekiness, there's lots of things that go on that people will remember the children of a lifetime, and so those people that teach them. And I think we've got to realize that really that's really what matters, those memories and those good
mm.
learning times at school.
That's a lovely note to end on, Jason. I completely agree. It's got to be, if they don't come to those dot B, pause B, dots lessons thinking, this is going to be fun. I'm
Yeah,
going to enjoy this. We're going to have fun. There'll be laughter. There'll be a bit of silence, but there'll be laughter and it'll be light. That if they smile, during the
most,
lesson, then that can only be a good thing.
most certainly. Well, I hope this is useful for everyone that watches it, and I know we've enjoyed doing them. So thanks a lot, and
Yeah.
thanks for
Take
thanks.
care. Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.